musicindustryblueprint.com. You're going to get a free video. Just click on the link that says free advice. The first video is called 5 Keys for Not Getting Screwed. Watch that. Then you're going to give me your email address, and then I'll send you a video called 7 Keys for Increasing Your Odds. That's also the way I can keep up with you. My mom's just moved here from Hawaii, so she's using my iPad as a GPS. So usually I have a sign-up form here, but I would love to know that we met you here. So just go to the website, hit contact me, let me know you're from here. We'll get you on that list as well. So thank you very much. That's a lot of very valuable information. And one of the things that's super important is that she had mentioned song evaluation. It bothers me so much when people come to me with a song that they just spent $2,500 on and then ask me what I think about it. If you can find quality people to evaluate your song for the $25, $35, $50, whatever it is that they spent, trust me, it's well worth it to get your songs critiqued beforehand, not after the fact. So I'm glad that they offer that, and I'm very excited now to bring up Amanda. Amanda I've been tracking down and stalking in a very cool way for like a few months, actually, trying to get together with her because we kept, by no fault of our own, sharing clients. And I'm sitting there going, oh, you were here for the hillbilly culture thing? Yeah, oh wow, great, okay, and who's running that? And they told me, and I went and I looked at it and I saw what was going on. Then I meet another group of people that had been involved, and I'm like, okay, she's kind of doing for the songwriters what I'm doing for the artists. But the one thing that's interesting in this town is everybody's creating all this stuff, but they don't know what to do with it once they have it. So that's where I came in, where I'm sitting there going, okay, you're going to build a list or you're going to build a catalog. I'm going to teach artists to fan engagement, teach how to get rid of it. It's kind of what Taylor and I did. You know, she became friends with her fans before she ever had music, before we ever had Twitter, before we ever had Facebook, or all we had was MySpace, which they're trying to relaunch again this week, it seems. I keep seeing everything about MySpace. So the key is that you've got this music, we've got these people that want it, but if you don't know how to protect it, you can get taken advantage of. And that's an area that I'm not good at. So what I've learned a long time ago is I go find smarter people than me to teach, and in this case, smarter, thinner, and prettier. So I would like to invite up Miss Amanda Williams. Come on up.
Well, thank you for that nice introduction.
You're welcome. You're about as Southern as they get. I mean, when I sit and I chat with you, it takes me probably about 5 miles in my truck to defrag from wanting to just talk like this all the time. You know, tell us a little bit about you, for those people that don't know you or your history, and I know you have some friends that are here, but let these folks know a little bit about you, and then we're also going to be putting it up later on MusicStartsHere.org.
Okay. Well, my name's Amanda Williams. I'm from East Tennessee. I'm the daughter of Kim Williams, who is a Nashville Songwriter Hall of Fame inducted songwriter, who's had over 140 million units sold from mostly Garth Brooks, but also he wrote Through Wooden Crosses with his buddy Doug Johnson. So I grew up learning from folks like Dad and his friends and seeing what it takes to go from being a disabled construction worker in East Tennessee, which is what my dad was, to ending up in the Hall of Fame. And it took a lot of hard work. And along the way, we moved to Nashville. I grew up here, you know, with all of this great influence of the music and the business folks. Ended up going to Berklee College of Music in Boston and got a degree in music business and management. And then when I came back to Nashville, my dad and some of his friends and I wrote a song called Beer Run that got cut by Garth Brooks and George Jones.
So E-double-E-double-R-U.
Yeah. So that was my introduction to the major publishing world, and I got signed to Sony as a songwriter based on the momentum of that song, and was there for a couple of years. Then Magic Mustang wooed me away with the promises of an artist deal on their rock label. And if you guys that don't know Magic Mustang, that's Broken Bow Records, Jason Aldean and all those folks. So I was there about 2 months, and they folded their rock division. So I was there as a songwriter for the 2 years. Then I ended up getting an artist deal at Category 5 Records with Travis Tritt was there with his Randy Jackson release, and Jared Neiman was there at that time. And then after that, a couple years went by, and I went to an independent publisher, and I basically finally learned the value of copyright. You know, I learned what I had been doing with my creativity, with my fruits of my creativity with the songs. And, you know, you learn all that in music business school, but, you know, if you're not actually writing songs and you don't know the value and the cost of that creation and the pain and the suffering that we put into our art, then you can't understand what it actually means to take that copyright and then the industry term is exploit it. Actually, that's what it's called, to exploit the copyright. And so, you know, starting our own publishing company in 2010 called Hillbilly Culture, we started an online community that has just been fabulous. I mean, there's some folks here that are part of the community, and we're just now going through a change of name to songwritingandmusicbusiness.com. A lot more corporate sounding, but you know, with the internet the way it is, it's important for people to be able to find us. And folks like you, Rick, I mean, that's the reason that we have such synergy, because you're teaching people the reality of pursuing your dreams in a way that is going to be more sustainable than trying to chase that pipe dream that we all have seen so long. So I appreciate you having me.
Well, and the thing that's important is that, as she mentioned, she'd gone to the School of Music and didn't realize till after she'd been here for a few years what it meant to protect yourself. You know, a lot of people, you wouldn't believe the number of songwriters that I meet or young artists that I meet that I say, hey, go ahead, let me see your catalog. And they don't even know what that means. And I'm like, okay. And first thing I make people do is I say, I need you to go home and type out lyrics to every single song you've ever written. I need to know who your co-writers were. That most of them can't remember. They don't know what the affiliation is with the performance rights organization, but they'll walk into a publishing house and ask for a publishing deal and show how frickin' unorganized they are. And when we had Clay Myers, he's like, let's get your stuff organized. Let's really treat it like a business. That's what I think I felt best after reading your book, is let's treat it like a business. It's great to say you're a songwriter, but if you can't prove you own your own stuff, I can prove I own your stuff, and you're screwed at that point. And that's the seriousness of what's happening. So with what you're doing with your book, how many people here, and this isn't to pick on, brand new to the business, songwriting, protecting your music? Anybody here not understand publishing?
That's kind of a trick question.
Then ask it different, because my question didn't get any response.
I mean, you know, I graduated with a 4-year degree in music business and didn't realize what the rights of copy are and how those correspond to the royalty streams and what it means when you sign a publishing deal.
Well, what I want to do is I want Amanda to explain some things, but I don't want to bore you if it's stuff that you already know. That's why it's important that we're honest, because you've got the ability to get her for free right now, because she costs, and all her education costs money, and she's willing to share it with you right now. So please ask questions. Like we said, there are no dumb questions. Like right now, does anybody have a question before I turn her loose on this caricature thing here?
Well, what she just said makes sense. Like, there's a difference between the two, that copywriting a song versus publishing, I guess. I don't understand the difference between those two, I guess.
Yeah,
You know?
well, most people don't, because it's not presented in that way usually. I mean, I studied all the classes that you're supposed to take. Of course, graduated in '99. The industry has completely changed since that time. But copyright is the same. And when I try to talk about copyright, a lot of times people are like, oh, I know how to copyright my song. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the actual bundle of rights that protects your original property. You want me to just do my thing?
Please, do your thing.
Okay. All right, so we've kind of boiled this down into a pretty simplified way of explaining what copyright actually is. And
Do you want me to hold that up to your mouth while you draw, or are you good?
I can do it, I think.
All right.
I have twins, so, you know,
Oh,
two-hand
there
thing.
you go.
Yeah, Todd actually has a worksheet that you can have and take home with you, and it'll help you remember kind of what we're going to talk about. If anybody wants one, just raise your hand. But I'll just start from the beginning. The song.
In the beginning, God created song.
That's right.
And
God
it was
created
good.
song. And it looks like this. It's clean, it's pristine, and you own every bit of it. Right? Now, when you think about monetizing that song, when we're trying to do something with our songs, you have to think of it as divided into half. It's like this. And this part here is you as a writer, and this part here is you as a publisher. Okay? It's still the same thing, because a lot of us in here, anybody that hasn't signed a publishing deal with anybody, they are their own publisher. So you are already a publisher, whether you know it or not, if you're writing songs. So when you're doing that, when you go to use your song as a commodity, you have to think of it. I asked our expert. There's a group called Blue Water Music here in Nashville, and the guy that's the COO of that is a genius. His name's Peter Roselli. And I said, Peter, why is it that in the new day and age of music, where everybody's self-published, why is it that we still have to think of the publisher half and the writer half of the copyright? And he said, that's just the way it is. That's the way it was set up. And if you're going to be a professional at doing your songwriting, you have to think of yourself this way. I think of it as forced schizophrenia. That forces us to compartmentalize ourselves. The writer part, you're responsible for being creative, for writing the songs. The publisher part, that's your business part. That's the part that's responsible for getting the songs out there. And in fact, this word to publish, all it really means is to make publicly available. So if you are making your songs publicly available, then you are acting as your own publisher. Now, we all look at these, at the copyright. So if you're self-published, what you have is the copyright is owned by you. Okay, the whole thing. It doesn't matter if you think of it as you as the writer or you as the publisher at that point. When you sign a publishing deal, for the majority of cases, unless it's specifically stated otherwise, what happens is you then get this other person acting as your publisher, and you are still the writer. This is how the income is split up from the song. They get half as the publisher, you get half as the writer. Now the important thing to remember is that in most cases, the copyright, which you guys know the symbol for copyright, it's this little C with a circle around it. That's for your words and your melody. It protects that. The copyright is owned by the publisher side. So let's look at what that really means. Now, copyright is intellectual property. It's something that we create using our minds. And it's just like your car or your land. This property, it's intellectual property. It's something that we create using our creativity, using our minds, and it has value. And you can think of it as being a bundle of rights. A lot of us think it's just one thing. It's actually a bundle of rights. And some of those rights that are within this bundle are the right to record and distribute. Okay? The right to print. So that's like sheet music, lyrics, anytime you're using it for that. The right to sync. That's short for synchronize, which means anytime you're seeing a YouTube video that somebody's got images moving along with an original song, that is using this right to sync or synchronize your song with moving images. Another one of these rights is the digital rights. A lot of people are talking about these a lot lately, the Spotify and all this. This is for streaming, digital streaming. So you can see, and there's other ones too, actually. So the right to publicly perform. And you remember ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC. The only thing that ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC do is deal with this, the right to publicly perform, that one right. So you can see how huge just one of these copyrights is. Now another thing, just so you guys know, is you'll often see or hear people say, I went to I sent in my form and got my song copywritten. This is totally my pet peeve. It's not copywritten because it's actually a right, R-I-G-H-T. So C-O-P-Y-R-I-G-H-T. And the reason I'm hounded on this is because if you tell me that you got your song copywritten, I'm immediately going to think you're a newbie. And I'm not going to judge you for that, but I'm going to understand that maybe you think you know more about this stuff than you actually do. And a lot of times it could just be a mistake of saying it. So it's important if you know the right term to use the right term. If you want you have a copyright and you get your songs copyrighted. So, kind of in a nutshell, this is sort of a real quick, overview of what we go over in our book about the different rights to copy. But that probably can get us started on a good conversation here. So,
does anybody have any questions on anything that she covered that may or may not be understood? Yes, sir.
So who handles, you said ASCAP, BMI, CSAC handle the right to performance? For example, like the right to record and distribute, is there organizations involved in that, or is that?
Good question. Yes, there are. One of the largest organizations, let me back up just a second and say that the right to record and distribute is called a mechanical. And I'll write that up here. Mechanical.
Is that where your good buddy Harry Fox comes into play?
Yeah, that's exactly right. A mechanical is a fixed permanent unit of sale. So anytime you record a song and distribute it, if you're selling MP3s or if you're selling CDs or tapes or whatever, any way that there's a unit of sale that somebody can take and have on their device or on a medium that they can listen to on their own. And the reason I'm making such a distinction about this is because it's not the same as a stream. So when you're like on Spotify or Pandora or something, that's not a mechanical, that's just a stream. But for the mechanical here, that's an MP3 or a CD or a tape or some way that's a unit, a physical unit of sale. And the cool thing about the mechanicals is that Congress actually sets the rate for those. It's set at 9.1 cents per unit. So say you wrote a song and Blake Shelton recorded it and put it on his record. Every time one of those units sells, whether it's a CD that sells that's got your song on it, or whether it's a download from iTunes, you as the songwriter / publisher are going to get 9.1 cents per unit. And about 60% of the folks in the United States are covered through Harry Fox Agency for the mechanicals. So ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC cover this publicly perform right. Harry Fox deals with the mechanical. And Harry Fox is owned by the National Music Publishers Association. Now that's not the only way you can get a mechanical. Each of us as independent songwriters / publishers, we can assign our own mechanical licenses. Now each one of these rights to copy that we covered, if you want to let someone else use your song, you have to give them permission in writing. That's a license. It's all a license is. You hear it, you think it's this fancy thing. It's not. It's a contract. It's a piece of paper that says that person wants to utilize or exploit your copyright in exchange for royalty money. That's the payment that we as songwriters and publishers get in exchange for allowing people to use our exclusive rights of copy.
Can I ask you a question? Let's say you and I both wrote a song and Lily wanted to cut it and I said no and you said yes.
Yeah.
How do we fix that?
I would have to consult an expert on that.
Is it one writer is allowed to give permission, or is it both people that wrote the song?
On the first use, and this is I'm about 98% sure on this. I'm not 100% because I'm not a copyright attorney. But I've heard of cases where the right of first use, just to give you the background, in the United States we have the right as songwriters and publishers to control who uses our song first. Until the song has been made publicly available, nobody has the right to do anything with your song as far as putting it out, putting it on a record or anything else. For that first use, both publishers technically have to agree. Although there are instances where it gets out and it happens without permission from both, and there ends up being fighting. And usually that's when one of the co-writers is an artist and they're trying to hold the song for
Chicken
themselves.
Fried is probably the best example of that happening. Zach Brown band, and Zach wrote it, is not the first person who released Chicken Fried. Another band did, and they pulled it back. So one of the other things you need to understand too, as she was saying, is that 9.1 cent is for everybody involved. So if you're new, that doesn't mean that if we write it, she gets 9.1 cent and I get 9 point. That's 9.1 cent for every single person.
So like in a rap song, a lot of times there's like 5 writers on there.
If you're in the room in LA, you get credit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So be conscious of that. You know, so what you're going to want to do when you sit down and do your write is write down your name, self-published. If you're writing with somebody you meet, ask them, who's your publisher? Great. Who's your performing writer? And put that right at the top of your song. I think you show that as one of the examples in your book of how to properly take care of this yourself. What a lot of people don't understand too is as soon as you write the song, it's legally copyrighted.
Copyrighted.
I said that because it's got to look that way because it's copyrighted. So it's legally copyrighted once it's out there. We were asking, I think it was at the Music Industry Blueprint Live event, we talked to Clay and we said, when do you send in the forms? He said, when I'm getting ready to send it to radio. And everybody was like, oh my gosh, you're not sending 45 bucks every time? He's like, no, you guys don't understand. Once somebody, no one wants to fight. So there's a lot of cool tricks and stuff that you teach. You have a question?
How does that legal then? If you would have to prove that you wrote that song at that point, how can you prove it?
Here's what I would do nowadays, just to be honest, is that it used to be that you would mail it to yourself and not open it.
Yeah.
Email it to yourself. It's time-stamped. Heck, if they could take you to court for watching porn, because they've got the time on the damn porn thing whenever you watch, I'm sure our email sent to myself with my song and the time will take care of itself.
Well, yes and no. You get into a really interesting topic at that because
Let's get interesting.
As Rick said, your song is copyrighted from the moment you put it into fixed form. So that means that from the moment, when you have an idea, right? We all have ideas. We all talk about our ideas. Get this great idea. It's nothing, and it has no value. From the moment that you put it into fixed form, write it down, or make a recording of your song, it becomes real property in the form of intellectual property, and it has value at that point. And it also is protected under international law with the copyright at that point. There was it's called the Berne Convention, and it was back in the 1800s, and the agreements for international protections of intellectual property were agreed upon at that time. Now, the United States became signatory to that in the 70s, and we've never come into compliance with it fully. That's why you've got a lot of, actually, Mr. Borchetta over here at Big Machine is really trailblazing because he is bringing us into compliance more with the Berne Convention than anybody has up to now. And the reason is because, to answer the first question, copyright, yes, it is protected from the moment it is fixed under international law. However, if you want to be able to take your copyright infringement suit, infringement is when someone steals your song or tries to claim that it's theirs or tries to monetize it without giving you the benefit of your creation, then you actually have to register it with the Copyright Office before you are entitled to go into federal court to protect your property. So there are instances where people are starting an infringement suit and then go and register it after the fact. Because you have to, that's a requirement to be seen in federal court.
And I think a lot of times you're not going to run into getting it to the masses to know if you've been ripped off or somebody else before it gets to radio. I think that's why Clay was saying, as soon as they're about to send it out. A lot of times too, there's a company called Sound Exchange. Sound Exchange is another great company that's collecting royalties and things for you right now. I always tease people and say we're in a business of pennies that adds up to dollars really fast, because like the royalty on a stream is a quarter of a penny. So that means if there were 4 of you, you're splitting a quarter of a penny between 4 of you.
Yeah.
So,
and while you're on the subject, I'll go ahead and finish out why Mr. Borchetta is bringing us so much into compliance. With radio in the United States, terrestrial radio, which is just when you're in your car and you turn on the free radio that comes, you're not paying for Sirius or XM or any of that stuff. That's called terrestrial radio. Up until Taylor Swift, there was no royalty paid for the owner of the sound recording. Now let me back up. What's that? That's a whole nother copyright. Your sound recording copyright looks like this. It's a P with a circle around it. It stands for phonogram. And that's just your recording. it has a whole nother bundle of rights just like this that you own exclusively if you are the owner of that sound recording copyright. So anytime you record and distribute a song, there's actually 2 copyrights in play. You've got your copyright, the C with the circle around it, that is your words and your melody. That protects your words and melody. Now when you make a recording, that's this P copyright. And whoever pays for that recording typically is the owner. So usually in the music business, that's the record company. Now what was happening until recently with Taylor Swift, the only people who got paid for this public performance on radio were the songwriter and publishers. Because radio only paid for this C copyright for the words and music. Now, I don't know who started that practice, because when you think about it logically, it doesn't make any sense. You can't hear a song on the radio if it's not been recorded, right? But for some reason, the people that set up the business as it is right now decided that only the songwriters and publishers should get paid for radio performance. Because they said, oh well, they'll sell records from having that performance.
And that's why it changed, is because the record sales weren't what they were accustomed to, and the record companies were having to spend, you know, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 to get an act to radio, and the only guys in town were the ones showing at the #1 parties were the ones making all the money. And that's why 360 deals started. That's why a lot of different things happened. And Scott is right, it's only fair. And as much as Taylor started him wanting, that's the new agreements that he's made with these he was gone straight now to the radio stations and worked out his own deals. So the artists at Big Machine Label Group are getting a lot more money every time their song's played on the radio than that 9.1 cents, which is really good.
Because they're getting paid not only for the C copyright, they're getting paid for this P copyright, which is only right and fair. We always think about, you know, you hear about the big bad record company who wants a piece of your writer's share every time you go in with a song. Well, the reason is because their artist is going to take the song and make it a hit on the radio, and unless they get a piece of that writer's and publisher's share, then they don't get paid at all for that. So you got to think about, as we're moving forward, one of the reasons it's so important to listen to folks like Rick who are thinking a different way, to learn these fundamentals of copyright, is in order to know what it is that we're dealing with, so that moving forward we can use common sense and be fair and use the principles of respect and honesty and integrity and create a new system that works for everybody, not just for a few.
And let me share this with you, and it's something that she brought up when she talked about the print. What people seem to forget is, if you want to go take your t-shirt and you want to put lyrics on that t-shirt, you have to get permission to put lyrics on that t-shirt, because you could have to pay royalties off the sales of those t-shirts to cover that print. A lot of people are getting in trouble with that right now. A lot of people are taking their favorite line from a song and making their own t-shirts out of it, and Abercrombie just got popped on one because they go, this is a great line. Well, of course it's a great line. It's part of a great song. And they made these shirts with it and they got in trouble. So if you, as the artist, are signed to a publishing deal and you don't get any portion of that, you have to ask permission from your publisher before you can put your lyrics that you wrote on your shirt. Or they could legally come back to you and say, hey, how many of those shirts have you sold? Great, send us our form of the money. So the more you can learn about this part of your business, because it all starts with the music, the better off you are. And you'll be so far ahead of the majority of people in this town when you can carry on a conversation with them and start I read Donald Passman, I think his name's book, just so I could learn enough of the lingo to get to somebody who knew what I was talking about and go, okay, they started talking to me about this. I remember a funny story. I got this contract from CAA on an artist, and I went through and I just couldn't understand it. And I called this guy up. I said, look, there's this thing, and he starts laughing. And I go, why are you laughing? And I was nervous about the writer. The artist had listed all this stuff that they had to have. I've got 3 people in my town shopping for this rider. It's from Titleist Pro V1 golf balls. The guy wanted a pack of underwear, and it had to be a specific pack of underwear, and this type of water, and certain color M&Ms, and you hear all these stories. So I've got 3 people running to get all this stuff. The artist shows up, and we push this big ass cart out to him, and we start unloading, and he's laughing hysterically. I go, why are you laughing? He said, dude, I have never in 10 years had anyone fulfill the rider. I said, but it's in your contract. He goes, we get drunk on the bus and just write stuff on this thing. He said, if you look at the very top, there's a word in there called suggested. I never saw the word suggested. So I've got this manager laughing at me hysterically. Had I called somebody or learned to read a contract or learned this stuff ahead of time, I would have told that guy where to stick his underwear and his Pro V1 golf balls, but that didn't happen. So all we're trying to do with the stuff that we teach and the things that we do is, one, to give you a little knowledge and information, to get the information for yourself. Because like she said, she's not a copyright attorney, so we're not going to tell you exactly how to do. I'm not an entertainment attorney, but we're going to teach you the questions to ask those people. I've always learned whenever you try to get something cheap and shortcut, it ends up costing more money than had you done it right the first time. So I don't even know what the cost of her book is, because she gave me one. Thank you. But if you can get something out of this that's going to help you, it's worth the cost of the book. So thank you for putting it all in one location.
Yeah, thank you.
Now tell us a little bit about what's inside the book. Let's jump into the book for a second.
Okay.
So that if anybody wants one before they leave, and I don't know if you have enough for everybody, but first come, first serve, or
We got a pretty good stack
we
back
got
there.
an Amish family in the back printing them up for us, putting them things, binding them.
Yeah. It's closer than you think, actually. But, yeah, we just, basically, like I was telling you guys, I learned a lot in school, and then I learned a lot coming and actually giving away my rights and figuring out that as an artist/writer, when you sign a publishing deal with a major or even a large independent, if you want to go put out your own song later, guess what you get to do? You get to license your own song from your publisher and pay them in advance. So, I mean, if you are an artist-writer, then it's good to know that going in, because you can get that, stipulation added into your contract to where you're not doing that. But this book, it starts out by covering all these rights to copy that we talked about. Any way that you can copy your work and make it available to others, whether it's print, whether it's sync, whether it's digital, publicly performing it, recording, distributing, those are covered by the copyrights. And each one of those rights, you have a specific license to be able to allow people to use that particular right, whether it's to sync it or print lyrics or to record and distribute. Each one of those has its own license, and each one of those has its own royalty stream that comes from allowing other people to use it. So it's important to us as independents and people who are signed to publishing deals to know which right corresponds with which royalty stream. So that's what this book starts out talking about. And then it goes through, let's see here. It goes through some definitions about what the different types of publishing deals are. The straight up traditional publishing deal. Then you've got co-pub, you've got administration deals, you've got collection and administration deals where people don't actually take your copyright, they just split the income, which is where a lot of folks are going nowadays, and that's a really good way to go. And then also in the book there is some Nashville industry practices kind of talked about as far as showcasing, as far as doing demos, and how you can know if you own this P copyright when you're making a demonstration recording, or whether you actually need to pay master scale to have the right to own this sound recording copyright. It's really important right now. And then, let's see, there's also a sample mechanical licensing request, and then there's some tips about how to organize your catalog, setting up a database to help you be able to pitch your songs more effectively. Just basic things about how to kind of fit in Nashville etiquette a little bit. Coming from being here for a while myself and then living in Boston, it's important. There's cultural differences in all these different places. So the more we can learn, the more able we are to be creative as we are shaping our own creative careers. You can be creative with both sides of it, with the business and with your songwriting. Because the one thing to remember about this industry, the music industry, is that almost everything is negotiable. So just remember that. when you're going in to talk to anybody about your career. Ask them what they can do for you. Make sure you know that a lot of folks talk a really good game, and I've had publishers that did not know that they were supposed to register my songs for me with my performing rights organization. And here we had cuts and they hadn't registered the songs. So it's important to ask these questions. Because just because you're dealing with a major publisher or somebody that you assume knows what's going on, they may and they may not. So it's just important for us to know, what we're doing here. And I just wanted to point out too that for you guys that are interested in, especially for independent artists, we've got a conference coming up here in Nashville. It's the June conference. This is our second one. And it's going to be at Hotel Preston, and it's going to be June 20th through the 23rd. So if you want to know about that, you can check out the new site. We're going to be open to folks on Friday of this week, April 5th, and it's songwritingandmusicbusiness.com.
Thank you. Put your hands together for Amanda. Denny, you have a question?
Yeah, a couple of ricochet questions off of what you said.
Yeah.
One was you're talking about what do you call the sixth form? When something is created, when you're writing it down, or you're making a recording of it.
Just fixed.
Fixed.
Yeah, fixed.
Does that include if you're just sort of doing a demo? I'm just sitting there and I'm just like the girl with red hair, blah 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 blah, with the girl with red hair, and I just have just a work tape that I'm working on. That's counts as that.
That totally counts.
And I would email that to myself. Most of your phones right now on your voice notes, if you're driving down the street and you got a melody that pops into your head and you talk it into your phone, send it to yourself. You have nothing to lose. I think the more evidence you show up with, a lot of times the better chance you have is the person who's most prepared.
And that whole thing where I was really curious about, because I'm interested in bringing the United States as much into alignment with international protections for copyright as possible. So looking into this whole poor man's copyright, because actually, according to the Berne Convention, it's against the Berne Convention to have to register and pay for registration of a copyright after it's fixed. However, the United States and other countries too do charge that registration fee, because you can imagine there's a lot of paperwork. People have to get paid to deal with that paperwork. So I was looking at the poor man's copyright, which is the thing where you send it in the mail, and that has actually been thrown out of court a few times for it. It doesn't count because now with copyright, with copy machines and forgery and things being so advanced, they just say no, this is not proof. If you wanted to have proof, then you would have sent it in to the Copyright Office and had that protection. And what you can do to save yourself the expense, just like Rick said, don't write a song and then that night go and copyright it, because it's a waste of money. Wait until somebody is getting ready to want a license. Wait till somebody's requesting a license for that song, or you're getting ready to put it out, right? And then do it as a collection. You can do a collection and spend $35 for that whole collection and copyright the whole thing instead of trying to do them one at a time, because it's $35 per time. So just save yourself the money and wait till you've got a good little collection. Even Sony and those folks do collections. They don't do them one at a time.
And another question, yes ma'am, in the back.
I had a question about how many in a collection. Is there a certain amount of songs that you put in?
I don't know.
I think it's 10.
Yes ma'am.
Can you just register with your PRO? Will that?
No.
All you're doing then is giving them permission to go collect money on your behalf.
And they don't really like it if you register everything with them either. It clogs up their system and they discourage that.
Everybody asks when you should have a performance rights organization. As soon as you put it someplace where it can be heard and you can start collecting money for it. So once you put it out on iTunes, once you start using it in your own videos or things like that, where that little side over there needs to start collecting, that's when you need to start registering them with your performance rights organizations. And something that Amanda said earlier, which made a lot of sense, is this is your business. You can go on your PRO and see what all songs are there. You can go in to any website now and see if your music's at Harry Fox. You can go into a lot of these places and double check yourself. And if you're not that person, then get an intern to do it, or get somebody within your organization to always double check. Don't assume that somebody's done it. It was a great point she made. Even some of these major publishing companies sometimes forget. Every so often, there's a new sync. There's a new something that's being discovered because in this town, they will not let the pennies get away. So they are finding new places all the time where your music's being played. You need to know about that stuff too and keep up with it as well. Yes, Danny.
Yep, I have my part two there. I've had experiences with songs and films and stuff where there's the performance license, and I also recorded it, so it's the Denny Band gets the mechanical license. I'm just sort of a little iffy on the difference between, I mean, to me, like streaming just seems like push a button, magical things, zeros and ones flying through the air.
Yeah.
And we were talking about MP3s are sort of separate from the streaming.
Right.
What's the
Well,
difference in those?
The legal jargon that what the contracts, when you see somebody requesting a mechanical license, and remember the mechanical is the right to record and distribute a certain number of units. That covers the right to record and distribute. The reason it's called a mechanical, it might help you remember, is because the song, the composition, has to go through some kind of mechanical process in order to be recorded and distributed. It just doesn't happen in thin air. So that's why they call it a mechanical license and a mechanical royalty. And remember, the Congress sets that rate at 9.1 cents per unit, and that's divided among ever how many writers you have. Now, for MP3s, when someone requests a mechanical license, the right to put your song on their CD and make and distribute copies of it, you'll see MP3 called two things. They'll call it a DPD, which stands for Digital Permanent Download, or you'll see it called PDD. And right now those are interchangeable. Permanent Digital Download or Digital Permanent Download. Now that's different from a stream, because the stream isn't permanent. It's just you hear it once and it's gone. You can't actually capture it unless you're recording it some other way. It's not being put right on your computer. But when you purchase a download from iTunes, then it comes onto your computer, and that gives you the right to then put it on your phone and your other devices, and you can listen to it on demand whenever you want to. So that's the difference. And then when you're talking about sync, that's a really, really interesting. A lot of the new developments that are happening in copyright law involve sync, because YouTube has made it so easy for people to distribute videos and make fan videos. Now, technically, all those fan videos that are out there are really infringing upon the underlying composition and the sound recording. The way that the practice is happening right now, see, what's interesting about copyright is these guys got together back when they started the Congress, back in the Founding Fathers' days, and when they put the Constitution together, they only protected literary works. They didn't even include music. And then, the next roundabout, they added print rights. And then the next roundabout, about the 1900s, they added recording and public performance. So copyright law is playing catch-up. And what we can do is learn the fundamentals of this stuff and be on the cutting edge and figuring out, according to the principles at play here in the foundation, what's actually going on. Now, what's actually going on is that the practice of people putting out videos is being allowed, even though technically it is infringement. And the way that it's happening is, unless you're monetizing your video, the majors are really not doing a whole lot to anybody about that, because they say, oh well, no harm, no foul.
Well, and that's why on a YouTube channel where you're doing covers, you're not allowed to monetize that, because it's someone else's and YouTube is paying the streaming cost. Right now, that was their kind of way to catch up, because the artist learned real quick it's not real popular to sue your fans. And that's who basically they were going after.
Yeah.
And the bigger problem is that we were getting all these announcements coming from people that were on jets and charging $125 a ticket for shows, saying, please don't steal from me with my music. And you're like, dude, you just raped me for $9 to park, $20 for a beer, and you're telling me that you're crying over the 9.1 cents that you didn't get. So it's great when people like Amanda, because Amanda's not on stage charging $125 a ticket or $8 to park or $10 to beer. So the writers had to come together and start protecting their butts, because the artists were making all the money from all the work the writers were doing and the record companies were doing, and it was the publishers that were the ones making the cash.
Yeah.
These are the faces we need to put on piracy. is the writers, not the folks that are out on the radio. To me, that's just my opinion. I
Yeah.
think it's so much easier to come. You had a question, sir?
I was gonna ask where ringtones felt and all that stuff.
Ringtones are considered a mechanical, and they have a different rate. They are 24 cents per unit instead of the 9.1 cents for the mechanical. So that's a pretty good new source of income for independents,
It's a
especially.
great source, and I'll tell you a story. Aaron Watson, who is in Texas, he's a Texas artist. He'll be playing Billy Bob's. There'll be 5,000 drunk people in there, and he'll pull out his phone and go, "All right, text this number." They all text it. He goes, "Congratulations, you just got my brand new ringtone." And he owns his own publishing. He was making $18,000 a month off ringtones from drunk guys in bars. So so think about that when you own everything that you own. So good luck to you there. Yes, Zelda.
Amanda, could you talk about fixed form? What does that include? Put your stuff out on YouTube or
Yeah.
your SoundCloud?
Just even really simply, basically, the biggest difference between, the only difference between an idea, which is this nebulous thing that's out here and we all have them, and something that has value is putting it down, writing it down.
Fixing it to something. Think about that. You fix it
Bringing
to
it-
paper, you fix it to tape, you fix it.
Making it real, making it tangible. So whether it's a recording device like your phone, you can sing your little melody down, and all of a sudden that is real property. You can write your lyrics down, scratch it down. That's why it's so important as songwriters that we record everything we do. Write it down. It was funny, I was writing with John Rich's little brother Isaac, and he was laughing. He said, "My brother says that one of these days somebody's going to have to put their laptop up on the wall at the Hall of Fame because we don't write our lyrics out by hand anymore. It's going to have to be in somebody's laptop." And that's true. But it can be really simple. And yes, if you're putting it out and making it publicly available, you're not only fixing it, putting it in fixed form, you're actually publishing at that time when you're putting it out.
Right, so is that important to not put it out there if you want to attach a valuable right to that, for someone else to use first right or first use?
Well, it can be. That's kind of a hot button topic because the old school would say, yes, do not put your stuff out there. Keep it for us to say where it goes. But there are so many examples of folks that put out independent songwriter albums, and then the only way that the major artists heard those is from listening to the songwriter albums like Lori McKenna. She put out songwriter albums. Faith Hill picked up 4 or 5 of her tracks.
Jeffrey Steele, gold, silver, platinum. Yeah,
Exactly.
They did them all the time. Mark
Patty
Gray.
Griffin. Even Colt Ford and Brantley Gilbert.
Yep.
Got the Jason Aldean cut that way. So it's up to you. It's just important that, it's a great question because that's really a personal decision. But also keep in mind that you sound like you might be from across the pond. The United States is the only place that has that right of first use. In Europe, it's free for all. Once you fix your copyright and somebody gets wind of it, anybody can do anything with it they want. They just have to pay you the royalty. So that's where the United States is a little bit different than the rest of the world is right now.
Dope.
First use, you write a song, you like it, you put it on YouTube, it's out in public. Does that mean anybody can take it from now? Remember?
Technically, yes, but usually if it's just the writer putting it out, the songwriter putting it out, and there's no license associated with that, then that's kind of a loophole. But yeah, technically, if you're putting it out there, then it's out there.
Or if you ever go to a website, Dope Music, or where you post your songs, does that mean it's out there?
Once it's on, now the rule is once it's made available for purchase, then now it's not first use anymore. So if you put it on YouTube just as a video, but it can't be bought, it's once it makes it to iTunes, once it makes it to one of those places, then I can hear it and I like it, I can record it and I can put it out without anybody's permission as long as I'm getting the proper licenses.
Right.
But I don't have to get the first use. And that's important if you're a songwriter to let your publisher know I'm writing this for me. Or if you sit down with a writer, it's courtesy because they may have a publisher that wants to plug it and they may know that Kelly Pickler's cutting a new record right now, and so be honest and open with your writer. Sit down with your co-writer. Say, hey, are you wanting us to write something for you, or we just want to write something, or they show up with the pitch sheet that says, hey, so and so's looking for this. Let's write something like this. Document write down, be honest, always err on the side of protecting yourself, and don't assume that it's been done for you, is a lot of what I've gathered from what you've said. And like I said, I really appreciate you taking the time to share with everyone here. Yes, ma'am?
I've heard about the pitch sheets before. I guess my question is, are they openly available?
No.
Okay, that's what I thought.
No, there are people at publishing companies that's their whole job all day. Is to
Keeping
put,
it secret, yeah.
no, is to put it together
Oh,
because
Well,
it changes all the time.
They hold on to it. They don't like it to get out. You can subscribe to the Rofax. However, sometimes people have criticized that particular resource as saying that once it's on the Rofax, that usually they're already finished recording,
Yeah,
Okay.
which
they've
there's
already
some
cut
truth
it.
to that. But you can, Nashville is a very vocal town. And if there's someone that's cutting, all you have to do is go around the venues over in Midtown and keep your ears open, and somebody will
Eat
talk
breakfast
about
at Nashville.
Yeah,
That's the songwriter's place of hangout before they go to their write. Get there about
Yeah.
9:30, between 9:30 and 10:30.
and with that said, you know you have a good friend if they will share a pitch sheet with you. I'm talking
Right.
die-hard friend if they will share that with you.
Clay just sent one. For those of you that were at the 2-day event, you got one included in what I'd sent. Clay had sent one over to show. It lists, the label, the artist, who the person is accepting the songs, who the producer is, when it's expected, what they want. Do they want an up-tempo? Are they looking for this? Are they looking for that? So it works out really well. Any other publishing questions before we switch things over to general music questions? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about mechanical licenses. Say, for example, if there's two co-writers and both of them are artists, but one of them goes out and cuts it as a single, but the other artist doesn't have a publishing company to represent them, can they issue a mechanical license themselves
Yeah.
without a publishing company?
Totally. You don't need anybody to help you with the mechanical. In fact, there's all kinds of forms that are easily available online. And, if you're part of our organization, we'll even furnish you with several different versions that you can make of your own. But basically, it needs to include how many units they're going to be selling. And you already know that it's going to be 9.1 cents per unit. So if you're sharing that copyright with your co-writer, then half of that is yours as songwriter/publisher. So you're entitled to 4.55 cents. Of course, that's you as the writer and the publisher per unit. So a lot of times what will happen if it's an independent artist, they'll make agreements. Even the smaller publishing companies will cost, they'll charge a minimum licensing fee up front. So it's usually, they'll charge you for 1,000 units up front, thinking that most independents usually don't move 1,000 units, or it takes them a little while. So for $45.50, you can get your friends, to pay that part for your licensing, and they don't have to worry about paying you again until they've sold that 1,000 units. Or if you just want to say, hey, you're my friend, pay me quarterly.
Yeah. See, there's
There you go.
timeline. Okay.
But $45.50, if they're paying out tons of money to the studio and everything else,
Yeah.
what we're really talking about here, and we boil it right down to something that's applicable not just to the music business, but to everything. It's about mutual respect, and about doing the right things, and about building a firm foundation that we can grow from, that's sustainable. And the only way that anything is sustainable is if it's built on mutual respect, and the respect for the creators,
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else?